Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode. Today we're joined by the fantastic Jordan Solender.
Hey Jose, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And so, it's a sort of a tradition at this point. So, Jordan, please, can you start us with your origin story?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. First business was probably around 13, shoveling snow out of driveways, recruited a bunch of friends, really got a nice client base there. Um, First exit was actually with a wedding DJ company. I've had a bunch of exits since then in tech, in retail, and most recently, one of my larger ones, which was an eight-figure one, was in 2023 with an IT services firm. Today, I own and operate eight different companies, and I typically spend about 15 minutes in each of them a day, specifically with operations teams and directors. I am the father of three boys under six, so I am in that season of life right now. Married for about 10 years now to my beautiful wife, Rachel. We live right outside of the Washington, D.C. area.
That's quite a resume, Jordan. I think
Yeah, no, it's
one,
got a lot of passion projects, but also a lot of fun.
oh, that's really fantastic. And your smile is really genuine because, it seems like you're genuinely still enjoying your time despite being extremely busy. One
So,
thing that oh,
oh, go ahead.
go on, Jordan.
No. I was just gonna say, yeah, no, it's a really fun time. I stay really busy, but I try to stay pretty grounded with the kids and whatnot. It just being the season I'm in, but it's interesting because like I'm in the season of being a young dad with young kids, but I'm also in my grind time, as most people would say, of their part of their life, right? Like that mid to late 30s. So it's a balancing act, but I try to have fun with it.
Actually raises another question for me. Is there any sort of mechanism that you use to stay grounded in your day to day?
Mechanism that I use to stay grounded in my day to day. So I would say honestly that the kids are probably the greatest anti-ego mechanism on earth. You can close a really big deal. You could feel important for about 6 minutes, then walk in the door and your toddler's crying because you cut a sandwich into squares instead of triangles, right? So it keeps you humble really fast. But I try to stay really intentional about presence, right? When I'm with my kids, I try to be with them, not physically there while mentally answering emails or calls. Um, because business is always going to ask for more. It's going to take everything you can give it, right? Every moment, every second, every hour of your day. There's no stopping the business. It'll always accept what you give it. And there's no finish line where it suddenly says, great job, now go enjoy your life. You really have to choose that for yourself.
Fascinating, really, that because there's a lot of people that will veer too much into this is my season of grind, this is my season of family, but you're able to walk that thin line of staying in both and actually enjoying both. And it can be things as simple as, oh, I cut the sandwich in a bad shape. It
Yeah.
brings it back.
I definitely enjoy both. I help coach my son's t-ball league over the weekends. You know, my oldest one, he's 5 right now, and then my 4-year-old, does gymnastics once a week, and I try to go at as much as I can. But I'm trying, to do it all. Some days I really nail it. Some days I'm answering Slack messages while watching Bluey, pretending I'm present. So it really depends on the day, right? Like you do the best you can, but like you said, and I stated, this is the grind time in most young dads' lives, right? We're trying to set us up for the rest of our lives and set the kids up. So it's definitely a balancing act, and you just gotta work smarter and not harder. And that's kind of what I teach my coaching clients in the coaching business, is really trying to figure out how to use your time effectively, how to really maintain true CEO hours so you can work on strategy and building the business.
What would you say from your experience from working with so many business and management, with management executives? What was the, let's say, not the advice, but the rule or the mechanism that delivered the most value to them that cut through all the noise in their head and they actually, oh, this makes sense, and it delivered change for them in their day-to-day?
Honestly, the biggest shift usually happens when they stop trying to be the smartest person in the room. And it's funny, I was on a podcast the other day where we were talking about how entrepreneurs have this emotional subconscious thing where they actually, I think, get this gratification of being exhausted, right? Because exhaustion equals reward. And a lot of leaders accidentally build businesses that depend on their constant involvement. Then they wonder why they're exhausted, right? So the highest performing executives that I know actually make this transition from I need to do everything to I need to build people who can do things without me. They start thinking about empowerment in the team. Also, calendars don't lie. So every founder tells me that family, health, and peace matter, and they preach all these things. But then I look at their calendar, and it looks like a hostage situation. So usually the real work starts there with really blocking off your time. My wife knows I live and die by my calendar. I have my staff of almost 300 employees across all my companies. They know if it's not on my calendar, I'm not going to do it. I live and die by that calendar. So that means scheduling the time that my phone is in a drawer, or going to my son's t-ball game, or going on date nights with my wife, making sure I'm sitting with our sales intern who's trying to learn and working on a really cool project. So if it's not on my calendar, I don't do it. And if your calendar doesn't reflect your values of family, health, peace, working out, whatever's in your best interest, then I honestly don't believe you. You gotta make time for what's important.
In a sense, the calendar represents who you really are, not what you say you are.
Exactly.
It also shows something quite interesting as well, which is an extreme sense of organization. Because you can only achieve that calendar if you're super organized about what you're doing and what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, your calendar is basically your real values in spreadsheet form, right? It's talking about your prioritize. You prioritize what you believe is important, and the calendar doesn't lie. And honestly, organization becomes survival at a certain level. Once you have multiple businesses, employees, kids, marriage, travel, these things stack up. And if you're not intentional, life kind of just turns into reacting all day. And you don't want to react all day. You want to take control of your life. So I've learned that there's also a difference from being organized to being available to what actually matters. And some people have perfectly optimized calendars and completely neglected lives. So you can have an optimized, perfectly groomed and whatnot calendar, but if it doesn't have the things that you need to be doing on it, whether it's business or family or self time, you're neglecting it all. You're neglecting something. Something's got to give. So this is all about balance a lot of the time.
One other thing that I'd like to touch base with you is that concept of delegation. So if you're stepping back, first off, it's difficult to step back because you've been doing it yourself for so long. And second, what should that process look like?
I practice the 10-80-10 framework with everything that I do. I'm going to go back to my sales intern right now. His name is Piers, and Piers is working on a project. And one of the frameworks that he doesn't even know it, but I'm putting him through right now, is something called 10-80-10. I actually teach this in all my coaching courses, whether it's the group coaching or it's the one-on-one. And it's how to manage and delegate effectively. So 10-80-10 essentially stands for 10% is ideation. I'm coming up with either the idea, the project, the process. What does good look like? What does success look like? What do I want to happen here? What are the parameters? And where's the strategy? 80%, okay, is Piers in this situation, executing on the project, using his creativity, being empowered to make decisions on how things need to move, problem solving along the way, doing research, and implementation. The last 10% is him and I catching up and pressure testing all the work he's done. By doing delegation this way and following this framework, you're able to accomplish 10, even 20 times more as an owner, because you are essentially force multiplying your team. You're making sure that they're empowered to complete a project. You're being very clear with your directions. You're setting parameters on what and what should not be done. And by doing this, you're able to achieve a level of productivity that you would have never dreamed. But where most people go wrong in this, and this is why I always talk about it, but the secret sauce is actually working with me to do it, is most owners will jump in the 80%. And they either won't trust the team, or they'll try to micromanage, or they'll say, no, 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 you're going down that path wrong, right? If they have a question, they'll come to you. If you've outlaid your ideation in that first 10% correctly, they'll typically never even come to you. That's the thing. And you get it so good to a point where you can just hand them a 7 to 10 page document and say, this is the 10%. Follow this. If you have questions, go to AI first. If you come to me, I'm going to be annoyed, right? You already know what good looks like. Don't be lazy. So when it comes to delegation, it's not about cloning yourself. It's about building trust and systems and clarity so the business can breathe without you sitting on its chest 24/7. And that's what 10-80-10 does for myself and my team. I swear by it.
Definitely sounds like a good way of building that foundation, because obviously at first you need to be there. You need to be there for the first 10%, and you probably need to be there at least a tiny bit more than you'd like to really instill all the ways of working into the team. But again, with each person that you do that with, the foundations become stronger. You have a wider net, you have a wider safety net, that you have more people to then instill that 10-80-10 principle to the next person in line.
Yep, 100%.
Follow up is still about this topic, which is communication is hard. Providing context is even harder. So where do you see people failing the most in that first 10% of communicating what good looks like?
Where do I see people failing in the first 10% of what good looks like? That was the question, right?
Yes, exactly.
So most leaders communicate tasks, but not thinking, right? They'll say, do this, but they never explain why it matters. Okay. Or how they make decisions, or what trade-offs they are considering, or what great actually looks like. If you don't show your team that, they're not able to essentially make those decisions on their own, right? So I always tell founders, if your team constantly needs you, there's usually some sort of context gap, right? It's not an effort gap. You might have a super hard worker, right, in a project that I'm going to keep using Piers as the example here, because he's actively working on a project now. He might even be able to hear me in the office. But in the document for a project he's working on that I gave him, there's context. There's why we're doing things. So he has an understanding of why this is happening. And his instructions there are to do research behind the why. So he has the why for me, he has the context for me, and he has what great actually looks like. So something that founders are doing when they're trying to delegate, and maybe there's a gap in this framework for them, and they're failing in that 10%, is they've been thinking about the business 24/7 for 10 years. And then they explain something for 6 minutes and they're shocked nobody fully gets it. Like, dude, your brain is 400 tabs open. You got to help them out a little. You need to put what you're thinking on paper, or in a Slack message, or in an email when you're doing this ideation. You can't expect people to know what you know.
Reverse, because, you set the context, set what great looks like, you provide the thinking, the Piers in this case goes off to complete the task. And my instinct here is saying, please correct me along the way, that on the last 10%, where you reconvene with Piers and you see what he produced, that sometimes providing the feedback itself will be an art in itself.
Exactly. And that's actually where the 10% at the end is actually where the real teaching happens and coaching happens for employees from leaders, or coaching from me to another CEO when I do CEO whispering, right? Because if you just delegate and then you disappear, people don't actually improve. They just drift along. And the feedback loop is actually what sharpens that judgment. So that's where they get better. So Pierce is going to do this project with me, and then the next project is going to be better because he's gaining more knowledge and more empowerment, and he's understanding more about how I think. So that's where you can say, hey, this part was great, or this part over here missed the mark, and here's why I would have approached this differently. And then over time, they just stop copying your actions and start understanding your thinking. And when that happens, that's the unlock, Jose, because that's actually when scale starts happening. That's when the team starts thinking on their own, and they're understanding the context, and they're taking it and running with it, and they're doing more than you even told them to do. And every founder says they want autonomous employees, but autonomy requires a level of tolerance from you as the leader for imperfect first drafts. That's the part people conveniently forget. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something that's crucial as well. Let's say the last piece of the trifecta, which is the feedback loops. Because the feedback loop underneath, by definition, has a concept of time. And what happens a lot of times is that feedback loop can go on for 6 months. Like, let's say you let Piers go off for six months to do the project. But then it's 6 months for him to learn something out of the project. So how can people also shorten those feedback loops so that, let's say, in this 6 months, you can have 2 or 3 feedback loops instead of just one? So quicker iterations, essentially.
You've got to stop waiting for the final product to give feedback. That's where people lose months, right? So the best leaders I know, early and often, they say, show me the draft, show me the outline, show me your thinking before you spend 40 hours going in the wrong direction. So inside of the 10-80-10, what I'll do is, I give the ideation, I'll give the project document, I'll lay it all out. Here's what good looks like. But I'll typically break it into phases, that 80%. I won't say like, go away, and then come back at the end of the project. I'll break it into like heavy phases or milestones. And then I'll give them, say, 15 to 30 minutes after each phase is done. They'll book time on the calendar with me, and they'll say, here's what I got so far. And I'll say, good to go. And if I have feedback, I'll give it. If they're in the right direction, I'll give them a thumbs up and let them move about their way. But it's way easier to course correct at 20% than it is at 100%. And honestly, a lot of delegation problems are really just delayed or poor communication problems, right? And I think you even kind of hit the nail on the head with that, and which was 100% correct.
And there's something else that I really want to hear your thoughts, because sometimes there's the stigma of, oh, I want to hire someone, but they must have this exhaustive list of skills already. But fundamentally, they may not have the right attitude for you. They may not be a good fit for your team. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on hiring for attitude rather than hiring for skills.
I want to be very concise with how I answer this one, because this is a good one, right? Hiring for attitude rather than skills. So I rather take somebody hungry and curious and accountable and coachable over somebody with the perfect resume every time, right? Because I don't know, I'm a big believer in that hard work beats talent. Because skills are teachable, attitude usually isn't, right? And to have a hard worker, I'll call out my sister, my little sister. Her name's Rebecca. She is one of the hardest workers that I know. In fact, she worked for me for a little while, and it was a bummer not to have her anymore. But she's easily one of the hardest workers I know. And she came to me when she didn't have the craziest resume, right? She was in a trade for many years, and she wanted to pivot out of that life into more of a corporate life. And I didn't have like a question about hiring her. It wasn't something I even concerned myself with. Does she have the skills to do this? Because she's teachable, she's coachable. She's one of the hardest workers I know. She still is today. She's a pretty resilient person. And I would take somebody like that every day. And I've actually told her so many times, right? Like, I personally would take somebody that is a hard worker over talent every day, because hard work beats talent every day. Those people have an attitude, right, that about work and determination and perseverance that you can't teach. I've seen so many insanely talented people, Jose, become culture grenades in a workplace because they either couldn't take feedback, or they couldn't collaborate, or they thought they were above the team. And truthfully, I was actually one of those guys really early on in my sales career, right out of college. And I got humbled real quick going into enterprise sales. But I've seen people with less experience become absolute freaking monsters, right? Like killers in sales and marketing, because they cared, they learned fast, and they took ownership. And honestly, in growing companies especially, things change constantly anyways. So half of the job you hired for won't even look the same in a year, especially with AI right now. So adaptability matters way more than people think right now.
And yeah, that's one of the things that people miss the mark on, like, because it's good that you touched the AI, because to an extent, people forget that recruiting an AI agent fundamentally can look very similar to recruiting the right human hire.
So if we're talking about AI agents versus humans, right? Is that was kind of the question, right? Like that an AI agent.
Yeah,
So I mean, these are very interesting and intertwined conversations that I'm having a lot, not only in podcasts, but with my HR teams and recruiting teams, of what we want to do with certain departments right now across all my organizations. It can look pretty similar, but people think that a lot of the times AI is just plugging it in and it works. But it's a lot like hiring. If you give vague, unclear expectations and instructions in zero feedback loops, you're going to get really bad output, right? It's kind of like when you give a prompt into any AI model. Good AI, like good employees, right? They need context, training, guardrails, and iteration. And just like hiring, everybody wants this magical, perfect candidate or hard worker or person that gets it immediately, or perfect AI tool that fixes everything overnight. It usually doesn't work like that. You still need leadership, whether you're the AI engineer fixing the feedback or you're the manager that's trying to teach. Either way, you still need leadership and feedback.
yeah, I'm gonna say what may be considered a not take here, but I want to hear your thoughts. That the best pathway to do AI adoption in your company is to become a better leader for your people.
So the best way for AI adoption, I don't think that's a hot take at all, by the way, but the
Oh,
best way,
thank you.
I don't think it's a hot take. But I don't know that it's becoming a better leader. If your if your team doesn't use AI and they're having a hard time with AI adoption, that means they're not seeing you use it enough. It needs to become a culture thing. So not using AI and leveraging current tools is something that's going to leave your company in the dust. End of story. And if you can't communicate clearly, define outcomes, create feedback loops, or document process like we do, AI is going to struggle too. So the companies winning with AI right now usually aren't the most technical, which is interesting. They're the ones with leaders who think clearly and use AI early. So I'll give you an example that, again, I said on another podcast, because the topic of AI and leadership and adoption comes up a lot these days. But it shouldn't be optional for your team to see you using AI. Saying to your team constantly and aloud, I just drafted these 15 emails with Claude and proofread them and sent them out, and it saved me 4 hours today. They need to know that. They need to know how you're using AI, and that will roll downhill, just like how energy flows, right? When you have a leader who is very energetic and really into the company and is very, just uppity, that energy flows out to the company. That flows into the culture. It's the same thing with AI adoption. The leader needs to be using AI tools, showing employees how to use AI tools. Stay on your toes about what you're learning. If you're not learning and adopting as fast as the world is moving, the company's not going to just like do that for you. You might get lucky with a couple employees saying like, "Hey, look what I just did," or because they're curious. But if you want your company to adapt, you need to adapt and adopt.
One more thing I'd like to hear from you, and this is not on the direction of AI. It's back to the human side of the equation.
Okay, I like the human
So
side.
yeah, yeah, this is more about let's say the retention of talent and keeping people engaged. Because there's that principle that money can attract people. Oh, here's a big salary. Come switch companies to my company. But in your vision, what do you see as being the most important factor to keep people within your company?
People within my company. So people stay where they feel seen, challenged, and where they think they can advance and learn. End of story. And money absolutely matters, but nobody's paying their mortgage with great culture. But after a certain point, people leave managers and not companies. They leave paths where they can't advance, learn, and grow. And the best teams I've ever seen feel like they matter, like they're on a mission together with the leader. They understand that mission, and then they have ownership, and then they feel heard, and they feel truthfully like they are growing. I know I can go into stories either about, my sister or my sales intern peers. I mean, I have a phenomenal customer success person at one of my IT companies. Her name is Nikki, and it has been awesome watching her grow and learn. And I think she feels my excitement to her, and she wants to do more. She wants to get involved. How can she get better? And it's really cool to see and hear. So I've felt this with lots of employees over the years, but it never gets old for me because I always get excited when they get excited. And then that's our feedback loop when it comes to culture. But the best teams I've ever seen, they feel like they matter. Also, people can tell when leadership actually cares versus when the company posts, "We're family," right? Like, oh my God. So right before they do the layoffs on Zoom, right? Everybody's gotten pretty good at spotting corporate theater now, but when it's genuine and you want people to succeed, I think employees are almost skeptical of that right now because they haven't experienced it before. So I think that employees can feel when it's genuine. I think it needs to come from the top, that they have a path and they can advance and they're appreciated, though.
So this next question is probably not going to be for you specifically because you're a really good leader, but so probably from other leaders and other companies that you've coached previously. So how can people get better at that thin line between barking orders to their teams versus actually being an engaged leader that can be charismatic and bring people along with them?
How can people get better at it? I think the biggest change that a leader can make, it's not about getting people to comply, and they need to realize that. It's about getting people to care. So that's the first thing. Anybody can just shout out orders or send off orders via Slack. Anybody can do that. And that works until people typically check out, right? And I think there's a term for it even now, trending, which is called quiet quitting. Yep, you just beat me to it. So the best leaders I know are really good at connecting people to purpose, right? They explain the why and not just the task. We say, and I'll give you an example in my IT company. So we're an advisory and a broker for IT services that clients might need, right? So I explain the why when somebody first joins, right? Like our IT leaders that we're working with, they're exhausted of always getting cold calls. They're tired of sitting on demos, right? They want to go home to their families. This procurement cycle for buying IT is annoying, and we are alleviating that annoyance. That's what we do. We are connecting them. I'm connecting my employees to the purpose. I want to make them feel included in hey, this is how we help these people. So I get them on my same mission. I want to make sure that they know that this is how our customer is feeling. This is how we solve it and alleviate it. So the other thing is charisma in leadership usually isn't being the loudest person in the room. It's about making people feel valued when they're around you. And that goes a lot further than you think. So when I'm on the phone with, I'll go back to Nikki, or even my project management lead, Kaya, when I'm dealing with them on a daily basis, I want to tell them they're doing a great job because they are doing a great job. And I want to seem excited about their wins because their win is my win. And I tell them all the time, right? Like when they win, or when I win, they win, and vice versa. So being charismatic and having just energy around their accomplishments, it really goes a long way.
I'm really excited about hearing you, because one thing that's been really key in this conversation and that stands out is you're not just telling the stories, you're also naming people individually.
Yeah. Well, I hope they see this episode because I appreciate them all, and I think they're doing a great job. And I couldn't be doing what I'm doing without them. It's all about putting not just the right people in the right job, but it's also about working with the right people. I mean, we have a pretty intense hiring process when we bring somebody on to our team. We guard our culture here. I'll put it that way. At every one of my companies, of all of the companies. In fact, before anybody joins our company, we do it's not required. They can say no, right? But like an assessment of like an aptitude assessment, like a Myers-Briggs, like a personality type thing. Because we want to know how they're going to fit in. Are they going to get along with their manager? Are they going to get along with these two coworkers in their pod of what they're working with? Are they going to get along with Jordan? What's Jordan's personality like versus this person? How are they going to work together in an environment? And that's a really cool place where we've leveraged AI. So my coaching clients actually get like access to that process with me. That's proprietary to how I run things. And they've seen ROI just hiring this way since working with me, which is pretty cool. So they're having people, and they're worrying about people less churning out than they were before, right? A lot of my coaching clients would go through these cycles where they would hire this great person, they'd feel really good about them, and then they'd quit like 2 months later. And then they'd go back to the drawing board again, and they would do that 10, 15 times. Now we're seeing churn dramatically reduce when we're doing hiring at any of my clients, which is pretty cool. I love seeing that.
That's fantastic, Jordan. And actually, it's a good capstone to, as we're getting close to the end of the episode. So how can people get involved with you and work with you?
Yeah, I would love to work with more. If you wanted to work with me, jordansolendercoaching.com would be the best way to work with me. If you just want to step into my world and just see what I'm up to, jordansolender.com. It has all my companies there, everything I'm up to. I post all the podcast episodes there, media write-ups. If you just want to follow along in the journey, if you just want to understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur and a dad, hop on Instagram. I'm sure you'll post all the links and whatnot. But would love, if you're a CEO, I would love to work with you. If you're looking for a new job and you're a hard worker, call me. Like, you will be appreciated. I will have a job for you at one of my companies. Let's get moving.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jordan. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, you as well, Jose. Thank you so much. Awesome being here. Always welcome the conversation. Been a pleasure.